Hi, and welcome back to Reverse Shot, the show where we take a look at the problems of the press. This week, taking a look at some of the more underreported stories across the country. We're going to start with a prison story. Back in the 60s and 70s, there was Attica in upstate New York, which was a huge problem, led the nightly news pretty much every night for a while, till there was prison reform. Today, it's Red Onion Prison in Virginia, and I bet you've never heard of it. Since September 6th, 6 men have attempted to set themselves on fire to call out what they say are inhumane conditions at the prison in Virginia. Here's one of only a handful of stories on this serious issue. In years past, it would have led the NBC, CBS, and ABC nightly news every night, putting pressure on the state to do something about it. Not today. Oh, by the way, remember the exploding Pinto? You may not remember the exploding Pinto, but in 1978, the National Highway Safety Traffic Administration said it had received reports of 38 fires with 27 fatalities and 24 non-fatal burns resulting from rear-end collisions with Pintos. Ford recalled 1.5 million Pintos and refitted them with vinyl protectors that would keep their gas tanks from exploding due to rear-end collisions. This was huge. Now, let's talk about Tesla today. As of December 10th, there have been 232 confirmed Tesla fires, resulting in 83 fatalities, according to independent reporting and numbers supplied by Tesla. This includes a single vehicle crash that killed 4 people in Toronto about a month ago. So, where's the nightly news reporting on this story? I bet you haven't heard about it, or maybe only slightly heard about it. There's a reason, of course. Well, who owns Tesla? Elon Musk. And Elon Musk is a billionaire contributor to Donald Trump's campaign. And since he also owns Twitter, you're not going to hear much about this story. But where is the concern for public safety? Where is the reporting? Why hasn't the news done more about it? We could. We just don't.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
He can go about his business.
You can go about your business.
Move along.
Move along. Move along.
That's right, the old Jedi mind trick. But we do actually hold Donald Trump accountable. We don't even really do that. We talk about his mistakes and his out-of-the-box outlandishness. But we do hold Joe Biden accountable. And that is something that we've done kind of well. Well, not really. But there is someone who can talk to that particular problem itself. Her name is Julie Roginsky, and she is a Democratic strategist. Here she is on CNN.
Nobody holds Donald Trump to this kind of standard.
Our inability to cover the news means that we've missed some important news that people should hear about across the country. Now, look, it's easy to report on Biden's and Trump's mistakes and foibles and their silliness, but the point is, the stuff that you need to hear about, we're not exactly getting to. Here's another example, short list. Donald Trump wants to change the rules of our elections. Think about that, folks. Meanwhile, Sean Penn slammed the Oscars for bowing to Donald Trump and failing to embrace the recent biopic about Donnie, the Apprentice. Now, that's a movie I also reviewed and recommended both Sebastian Stan, who played Trump, and Jeremy Strong, who played Roy Cohn, for nominations for their acting. It's an important movie. Bowing to Trump means few may see and appreciate it. Then, well, the only bright spot in all this, I guess, Bill Maher said he may quit his show because he don't want to handle Donald Trump for the next 4 years. You kind of got to like that, right? Or at least laugh at it. But meanwhile, this week was also one of the most underreported things that happened this week was with Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and it's important for a variety of reasons. Let's take a look. These are perhaps 2 of the most important social media posts of the week. In the first one, Donald Trump said, and I quote, "Any person or company investing $1 billion or more in the United States of America will receive fully expedited approvals and permits, including, but in no way limited to, all environmental approvals. Get ready to rock." Really? Get ready to rock. Well, here's the rock you're going to get rolled. The bottom line is, if you're a billionaire, you're going to avoid environmental concerns if you give $1 billion to the government. That's not what this government is about. That's called a bribe. Oh, and let's take a look at the next tweet. Elon Musk, Donald Trump's latest bestie or beastie, drove the point painfully home this week in criticizing those who have canonized the accused shooter of United Healthcare worker CEO Brian Thompson. He said that, quote, insurance companies, like any company, have a duty to shareholders to maximize profits no matter how ruthlessly the radical left espousing otherwise needs to grow the hell up. Really? It's not just the radical left, folks. This is a populistic movement, this populism that Donald Trump rode into office. It doesn't look like he's going to be able to harness it. You can ride the whirlwind, but you can't control it. That's the scariest part of all of this. This is class warfare, and this is underreported. We don't do it very well when we do report it, and we don't grasp the significance of populism in the United States and what this means. It's scary going forward, and we better get our shit together. So, let's talk to someone I mentioned earlier who can address the Democrats' inability to address populism, as well as the media. Her name is Julie Roginsky. She is a Democratic consultant, a contributor to CNN, and she's upset with what's going on. I guarantee you want to listen to what she has to say. Hi, and welcome back to Reverse Shot. I am your host, Brian Karem. With me now is Julie Roginsky. I hope I pronounced that right, Julie.
You did. Congratulations.
I know yesterday they didn't get us too well, did they?
Back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah, there you go. Julie is a Democratic strategist and joins me now to talk a little bit about one of the stories I think that has been not covered all that much. And rather than poke fun of the press for doing that, which I would have endless fun doing, I'd rather just highlight the issue itself. And Julie, you can point out some of the problems. After the election, it looks like the Democratic Party is almost destroying itself. But I'll leave that up to you, your thoughts on it.
Well, I think everybody kind of diagnosed, or I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people diagnosed the problem, which is that we were not speaking, or at least a lot of us did, we were not speaking to voters in plain, concise English about things that they actually care about. And we were segmenting too many different cohorts as opposed to actually just saying the same thing to everybody because the economy's stupid always and forever.
Right. Keep it simple.
Yeah, it's just exactly keep it simple, stupid, as James Carville would say. But where the party has diagnosed these issues, they continue to still, it looks to me, make the same mistakes. And one of the things that I pointed out to in my Substack column, Salty Politics, today was that the DNC had a meeting, its winter meeting in Arizona, in Sedona, or somewhere in Arizona, I shouldn't say Sedona, and proceeded to open the meeting up with a land acknowledgement statement, effectively saying, we stand here in the land of the whatever Native American tribe it is in Arizona. And we acknowledge that this is their land and that we stand on it, as occupiers. And I'm thinking, who's this for? Like, who is this performative bullshit for? because there is a poll that was an exit poll.
Like the performative bullshit aspect.
Yeah, and so much of it is performative bullshit.
Yes.
It's virtue signaling. And it's certainly not for Native Americans because we know that there was a study done, it's not hard to find, of what Native Americans cared about. And by a mile, they cared about jobs and inflation and the economy and healthcare. And to the extent that they cared about issues specific to them, it was about tribal sovereignty and tribal rights, none of which has anything to do with acknowledging who stole whose land 500 years ago. I'm not suggesting that shouldn't be a history lesson that people should be aware of. Yes, Native Americans were treated horrifically and continue to be in some ways throughout the history of this nation and prior to this nation's founding. But nevertheless, this is what you're wasting your time on. Like, if you're trying to get Native Americans to vote for you, who, by the way, voted for Trump this year at higher margins than Latinos did, or African Americans did, or Asians did. So clearly they have something to be upset with the Democratic Party about. This is the bullshit that you're doing
And,
sort of
and
in lieu of actually doing the work to help them. Like it's all very nice to kind of say this and say, well, got that off my plate, and now I'm gonna go have a nice drink, um, and pat myself on the back for virtue signaling. But that's all it is. It's a bunch of virtue signaling. Like these people actually need help.
yeah, I like you can acknowledge where the land came from, but I mean, technically, if I remember the Mexican-American War, we kind of stole it from Mexico, who stole it from Native Americans. That
Yeah, sure.
particular portion of land. So we didn't even get that part right.
I mean, I sit here in New York City on the land of the Lanai Lenape, who the Dutch stole from. They stole it from the Dutch. The Dutch stole it from them. Well, I guess the British stole it from them first, then the Dutch, then the British.
Yeah,
It's all such bullshit, right? To the extent that there are any Lanai Lenape left, and there are not many in the New York area. I assure you that this, as I keep saying, performative bullshit, this virtue signaling, is not what they're looking for.
well, no, and it seems like the Democratic Party has lost rural America, and it used to be the party of rural America. It's lost its majority and seems to be dissolving itself. But at the same time, while Democrats eat their own, we don't report on this very well at all. We don't seem to understand what's at stake. I think we're in the press, we're furthering the demise of democracy by not understanding what the hell's actually going on in the country.
How many New York Times articles did we have to sit through in 2017, 2018, 2019, and so on, about the voter in the Ohio diner, who was the mythical diner, the mythical Trump diner voter, right? somewhere in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, who we had to sit there and read story after story after story after story about, and listen to his grievances about what was happening. And yet, we're not responding to that person, because I'll talk to you about the same thing, right? Like the whole movement with defund the police. Like, who's looking to defund the police? Because Pew did a study, a very long study, that showed that something like 75 or 76% of all African American voters do not want to defund the police, right? So when you're going around, and as we were a few years ago, not we, certainly not me, but as this party became known for, defund the police, who are you, on whose behalf are you doing this? Because it's certainly not them. They don't want to defund it. They want, by the way, they want the justice system revamped, but that's a lot harder than chanting defund the police while marching down, Broadway and waving your Black Lives Matter banner, and then going back to whatever else you do in your life, which is not actually addressing racial justice issues. Calling Latinos Latinx, which is a word that doesn't exist in the English language, in the Spanish language, in any language, I should say, in the Spanish language, just says to Latinos that our priorities are totally out of whack. Because if you look at what they want economic opportunity. There's a lot of them are small business owners. They want job creation. By the way, the same thing that white voters want, and rural voters want, and women want, and like everybody wants the same thing. And yet we virtue signal all the time. It's this performative, as I keep saying, nonsense. And at which point is our leadership going to get the clue? I mean, this is the.
Well, how's you going to do that? Well, you have Jen Psaki on it. Where is she? MSNBC now. I mean, former spokesman for Trump. I don't think she gets it. I know the current people in that administration don't get it. And you have people that go from, and this is not unique to the Biden administration. I mean, there are people who flow from politics to my world of journalism, and from journalism to politics. But it's the people that flow from politics to journalism, or talking headism, that I think bring the greatest discomfort to those sitting at home watching. They bring their point of view without really cluing into what people really need to see.
You're talking about me, because I went from politics to being a talking head, but the difference is I always stayed in politics, right? I never gave up my day job.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you why that's helpful.
About me too. I've done it.
But I'll tell you why that's helpful. It's helpful because I still watch those focus groups. It's helpful because I still speak to voters as part of my job to make sure that Democrats get elected, and I've had a pretty good track record in doing that. And what I hear from voters has absolutely nothing in common whatsoever with what I hear on television, right? Or even that I hear from our leadership.
Well, let's stick to what you hear on television. What do you hear on television? What don't you hear on television that the voters are?
I'll give you a great example. So somebody, an anchor on MSNBC, one of their nightly anchors, had a woman on right after the election, but before Thanksgiving, saying, it's okay to not go to Thanksgiving dinner with your Trump uncle or, somebody somebody who voted for Trump, because that person is part of the patriarchy and you have to, you don't have to put up with that nonsense and it's bullshit. And you're, he voted against your interests if you're Black or if you're a woman. Look, I in my day job, in addition to my other day job, I co-founded a Me Too organization called Lift Our Voices, a nonprofit. And so I know a lot about what women go through. And I will tell you that using words like patriarchy is not going to get anybody to vote for you. I mean, another word that just should not be part of the political lexicon, right? Like,
don't talk to your own family members.
Yeah. But to go back to the larger point, if your uncle voted for Trump, you better go to Thanksgiving with him. You better sit down with him, and you better politely, and don't lecture him, because we have such a problem lecturing people. I mean, I'm kind of doing a lecture now, but I'm preaching to the choir.
Preach, baby, preach.
Right, but I'm preaching to the choir here. But I mean, I know people who voted for Trump, and I'm never going to tell them that they're part of the patriarchy, or as a woman, they voted for a convicted sexual assailant. And I was sexually harassed, while I worked at Fox News. And how could you possibly vote for somebody who has like a bunch of sexual harassers and, himself a sexual harasser and has all these sexual harassers coming to the administration? Like, that's not how you talk to people to convince them. And I know that because I actually get people elected, and I know what you have to do to change their minds. You have to make them see things from your point of view respectfully and authentically. And you don't ignore them, and you don't say, don't go sit with that person because he voted against your interests. In fact, quite the opposite. If that person voted against your interests, you better run to go sit with him.
Right.
To change his mind so that next time he doesn't, because look, it's not like people who voted for Obama didn't vote for Trump and then went back to voting for Biden and then back to voting for Trump. These people are gettable. Are gettable.
Well, there's a hardcore that isn't, but most people, there's a hardcore on the left and a hardcore on the right. Yeah. They're never going to vote anything but that way. The vast majority of Americans, I've found, are somewhere in the middle. And the ones that appeal to them and the biggest complaint I heard, and the thing that we missed in the media, were people saying, look, all right, fine, Donald Trump's a convicted felon, but at least he didn't preach at me. And that
look, I'm sitting here in New York talking to you, but I spend a lot of time on weekends out in rural Pennsylvania. In fact, in the swingiest part of Pennsylvania, which is the swingiest state, you might agree, in the nation. So I'm around a lot of these people, a lot of them.
They're all my in-laws, by the way.
Yeah, well, right? So, like, are you not going to talk to your in-laws now? And so, like, I talk to them, and the reality is they didn't hear anything. They're voting for him because he knows how to communicate. At least he's telling them something, right? I'm not talking about the people. Like, there's a guy who lives kind of a couple miles away from us out there who has a flag that says, something like Jesus is my Lord and Trump is my president. Like, that guy, you're never going to get, right? Like, that guy. That's not a gettable guy, right? No, it's not. Jesus is sorry, it's even worse. Jesus is my savior and Trump is my president, right? So like, that guy you're not going to get. But you are going to get people who said, I go to the Giant, which is the local kind of chain, grocery store chain there. And the people who are like, you know what? Like, I just can't afford, it's
eggs. Eggs.
Right? Like, everybody keeps talking about eggs, but like, here's the reality. The reality is that we have all the time in the world, people like you and I, to talk about these larger issues because I can afford eggs. Like, I can afford the eggs. But if I'm a single mom who's working a bunch of jobs and I'm having a really hard time paying for that new uniform for my kids' little league, uniform, and I'm having a hard time. My insurance isn't covering what it needs to cover for me from a health perspective. My parents need to go into a nursing home, but I really can't afford to do that. Like, you don't want to hear this stuff. You don't want to hear the performance. Like, you don't want to hear the virtue signaling. You don't even want to think about, like, you don't even care about the dictatorship or the threat to democracy, because those are all conceptual issues that people like I spend a lot of time not sleeping at night thinking about. Holy shit, we're about to have like a complete autocracy here. But these people don't have time for that, and I don't blame them for it. And you're not going to sit there and say to them, you're voting for the patriarchy, or you're voting for the racist, or you're voting for like, they're voting because they want to afford their groceries. And unfortunately, inflation didn't come down fast enough.
Well, and the Democrats couldn't frame an argument. They let the Republicans frame the argument. They reacted to the frame. The press did the same thing. It's my contention that the worst administration I've ever worked with communicatively is the Biden administration. Worst. The absolute worst. And the worst group of reporters I've ever worked with are those that are there now, who cannot frame. And the best at framing arguments, Donald Trump and the GOP. They can frame an argument. They may not be genuine in their argument, but by God, they'll get you to listen, and they'll communicate with very simple phrases. And I think the press and the Democrats just can't communicate.
It's a very simple thing, right? You think about successful campaigns. They could really be summed up in a few words. And I go back to 1992. It's the economy, stupid, of Bill Clinton.
Right.
And then I go to Obama in 2008, hope and change.
Right.
George Bush, compassionate conservative.
Right.
These are all things that I still remember, right? And we're going back now, 30 years ago to 1992, more than 30 years ago. And then you think about hope and change. And then you get to where things really go off the rails. I'm with her, which was Hillary, right? Like, why am I with her? She should be with me.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, really flip it. I'm with her. No. While we were saying I'm with her, Trump was saying "Make America Great Again." And by the way, much like
that
Obama,
was Reagan's slogan, by the way.
Right,
originally.
right, exactly, right. But if you think about it, Obama, with the whole hope and change, that was an avatar for whatever hope and change you wanted to see individually, and however you, Brian, view hope and change may be different from how I, Julie, view hope and change. But nevertheless, we could all project our hope and change onto that. Same thing with Trump, "Make America Great Again." What your concept is of making America great again is different from my concept of making America great again. But we could all get behind the notion that you can make America great again if you don't like what's happening now, which is what his whole slogan was. And it was a great slogan. It continues to be a great slogan. Kamala started out on the right track, the whole, we won't go back. We're going to go forward. We won't go back. We'll go back. And then they dropped it. And like a month in or 2 months in, they just stopped talking about it. And I was like, why? Like, I kept shouting. I mean, I literally, because I'm at CNN every day, I'm on air. I'm like, what are you trying to tell us? We will not go back. We will not go back. We want to go forward. We will not go back. We will not go back. And what that means is, for some people, we won't go back to COVID. For some people, it means we won't go back to having a rapist in the White House, alleged rapist, or I'm sorry, convicted. I shouldn't say alleged. He was convicted.
Adjudicated in a civil court.
Adjudicated. He was not convicted, right? Adjudicated sexual assailant. For some people, it means we're not going to go back to having a liar. For some people, it means we're not going to go back to the insanity. It means something for everybody, but it did mean something about Trump, that we're not going to go back. We're going to go forward. And they just dropped it. And then they started talking about democracy. And I'm sitting there and thinking, what a conceptual bunch of nonsense democracy is when people have real life problems that they are worried about. And I don't know if Trump was beatable this time around because the economy was not working for enough people potentially. But nevertheless, that would have been a better attempt than let's now bring in Liz Cheney to talk about democracy, which is, again, somebody in my position can afford to spend a lot of time worrying about and thinking about. I'm not suggesting it's not important. I'm just suggesting that it's not important enough for enough people to get them to vote against the price of eggs.
Right. It's all about eggs, baby. So as we close this out, what do you recommend, communication wise? What do you think we in the press should do? What do you think the Democrats should do?
Well, Democrats need to just say what they mean and mean what they say and need to be authentic and don't worry about who you're going to offend, right? You can't make everybody happy. And look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict where you had these student protests going on and Democrats were just so afraid of pissing off the Jewish community. So they didn't say much. And they were so afraid of pissing off, the Muslim community in Michigan that they didn't say much. And lo and behold, Kamala Harris came in third in Dearborn, Michigan. So my point is, you're going to piss off somebody anyway. So just go ahead and say what you're going to say. Trump pissed off a lot of people, millions. He's not afraid of saying what he means. I mean, sometimes he's not rational in the same sentence as to what he's saying. And sometimes he says two things at the same time. But nevertheless, he's not walking on eggshells. And I think both Democrats are themselves walking at eggshells, afraid of taking a hard position on difficult things, and also make people feel like they are walking in eggshells by saying something because, God forbid, they're going to be offended because somebody like me might say land acknowledgement statements are the stupidest effing thing I've ever heard. And
they are the stupidest effing thing I've ever heard.
And then, oh no, now you're insulting Native Americans. No, I'm sure I'm not insulting Native Americans. And if there's a Native American listening here who is insulted, I apologize. I just think you probably have bigger priorities in life to worry about than people acknowledging that your land was stolen 500 years ago. But I also, as far as the press is concerned, stop with the access journalism, because this is, if you want to know why the legacy media, or if you called it, corporate media, why it's dying, it's because people are so enamored with having that first interview with the president, or they're having an exclusive interview with the Secretary of State, or the exclusive interview with, the Secretary of Defense, that they're pulling their punches. And you know who you're dealing with because you've dealt with him for a decade. Come prepared. You know what he's going to spew is 99% bullshit. So come prepared. And that means really spending a lot of time thinking about every eventuality of what he could possibly say so you could call it out. And I'll just say this. I was, for a long time, one of the few Democrats at Fox News. And I always produced myself because I always knew that I could not rely on anybody but myself. So I was on a panel show called The Five. And I was on a panel show. Yeah. And I was the Democrat
they loved
there.
me on The Five.
Well, yes, I remember. And I was on a panel show called Outnumbered, but I was always the only Democrat on those shows. And, I didn't get much sleep because I was so overly prepared, because I knew that whatever they threw at me, I had to be prepared with the facts. So I had to think about through 27 different contingencies of what 4 other people would say to me and how I would respond to whatever they could say, ranging from, the origins of the Sunni Shia conflict to the price of eggs, for that matter.
Eggs!
Price of eggs. But this is what you have to do as a reporter with Donald Trump, because you could ask him about the price of eggs, and he's going to start talking to you about, the price of,
He'll talk to you about anything else. Well, let me tell you why Hillary Clinton is the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So you have to be prepared for anything, because you're not dealing with somebody who's a linear thinker. And if you do your job, you're going to do that. But if you don't care so much about doing your job, because your job consists of having that exclusive under the banner of, X network exclusive with Donald Trump, you're going to end up being owned. I mean, look, he's going to control the conversation.
Yeah.
So you have to get ready for it. And I think what you...
Oh, I'm ready. I don't think he wants me around, but
look, what you and Acosta did in the White House the first time around should be a master. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on your podcast. I really mean it. It is a master class in how to do it. And, who knows if he's going to allow anybody like you back in the briefing room, but...
or if he'll show up and take questions from us.
Or he'll show up and take questions. He probably will, because he loves seeing his face on TV. But he's going to take questions from, Steve Doocy or Peter Doocy, whichever Doocy's in the White House. I can't keep track of them. But
or OAN or Epic Times or News Nation or James Rosen will get questions in, but the rest of us won't. Exactly. Well, listen, Julie, I really do appreciate the time. I'd love to have you back and talk more about all of this, because this is right in my lane, man. This is right where I live and breathe. Is the crap that I wish the Democrats would just wake up And I wish the press would too. But wish in one hand and shit in the other and see which one fills up first.
It's going to happen eventually because you can only get punched. Well, the press is going to go out of business if they don't, and Democrats are going to go out of business if they don't. So I think by necessity, what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention, or whatever that expression. Right. It's going to happen.
Or, if and buts are candy and nuts, we all have a hell of a Christmas. That's it.
or we all get rounded up and put in detention camps for being.
Yeah, well, that's
that. My family comes from a long tradition of gulag dwellers. So I guess I can prepare.
Now, you'll be in the front row with me.
We'll both be working in some Alaskan gulag together.
Yeah, there you go. Or Texas. Picking fruit in Texas or California. Yeah. Anyway, well, thanks for joining us. The name of the show is, it's Reverse Shot, and we thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next time. If you like what you see here, please hit the like button and subscribe to our newsletter. You can find all that in the comments below. Also, I want to remind you that really does help out the algorithm gods and helps us out. Each week, join us as we bring you more on the problems inside the press here on Reverse Shot.